Hello and welcome everyone to our Tur Bet Yosef. Today we are learning Siman Taf Resh Ayin Daled. Bezet Hashem Shiur Bi L'Hatzlachat Am Yisrael, L'Hatzlachat Toshvei Eretz Yisrael, and Hatzlachat Hayalenu Hikarim. Today we're learning a Siman, it's a short Siman, 2 Sifim, which discusses lighting from one candle to another candle. As we've mentioned earlier, it's agreed upon that it's prohibited to use the lights of the Hanukkah for any mundane purpose, Asur lehishtamish le'oram. But what about lighting from one candle to another candle? Both candles are kadosh. Both candles have a unique kedusha and the holiness of lighting of Hanukkah, and they're both considered ner mitzvah. And therefore, would it be permissible to light from one to the other? A common example would be either from night 2 and on, would you want to light from one to the other without a shamash, and it would be very common when you're lighting in by chatzer, and there's a few people lighting, a few homes lighting, or for the Ashkenazim that have light numerous Chanukiahs in one home, could you light from one to the other? The Gemara in Shabbat, Taf Bet, brings a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Rav says, "En madlikin miner lener," Shmuel Amar madlikin. We have a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Now, in general, the halacha is always like Rav bi'isurei and Shmuel bidinei. In laws that are mutar and asur, the halacha is like Rav. However, Shmuel was a great dayan. The halacha is like him in the dinim of Choshen Mishpat and dinim Amonot. However, the Gemara says here that this is one of the 3 places that the halacha, that Rabbah did like Shmuel. And therefore, seemingly the halacha would be like Shmuel. So the Gemara discusses what is the reasoning of Rav. And once we can understand why Rav is saying it's a problem, we can understand what Shmuel is saying when he is allowing it. The Gemara brings 2 explanations in Rav. One is because it's machish mitzvah. Machish mitzvah means that when you take from one candle to the other candle, you are lessening as you draw the oil from one to the other, and therefore it's not proper. The other one says, no, it's a bizui mitzvah. It's not proper to disgrace the mitzvah. The clear nafkamina between these 2 explanations is whether you're lighting from one candle to another. According to the explanation that you're taking, it's a problem. But according to the explanation that it's a disgrace, I'm not disgracing the mitzvah. I'm using it for another mitzvah. It's actually the same mitzvah, Ner Chanukah. We will discuss later what about other mitzvot. But right now we're discussing from Ner Chanukah to Ner Chanukah. And therefore, if it's a problem of bizui mitzvah, it would not be a problem. The Gemara does disprove. The Gemara has a lengthy discussion and brings different proofs. The Gemara says that the reason seems to see that the Gemara is leaning towards the reason of bizui mitzvah and does disprove the concept of machish mitzvah. The Gemara then says, "May have'ala." What's the psak? And the Gemara brings that Rav Huna Berei de Rav Yeshua says it depends. It depends on if hadlaka oseh mitzvah or if hanacha oseh mitzvah. So this is a concept that is mentioned in the next Siman Taf Resh Ayin Hey, and the concept is as follows: do we have to place the Chanukiah, the candelabra, with which we're lighting, specifically in its position to light the candles of Hanukkah? Is the hanacha a mitzvah or is the hadlaka a mitzvah? Obviously, the one that holds hanacha is mitzvah. Obviously, you have to light. But do I have to put the Chanukiah in its position before I light? According to the explanation of Huna, this machloket of Rav and Shmuel is dependent on that. Rav holds hanacha is the mitzvah, and therefore, if I light from candle to candle without putting it there, therefore I'm doing a mundane act. I'm lighting something that's not proper. However, Shmuel holds that hadlaka is a mitzvah, and only the hadlaka is important. The psak of the Gemara is like Shmuel, that hadlaka is a mitzvah, and it's okay to light miner lener. The explanation of Shmuel, what is Shmuel saying? Is Shmuel saying lighting from one candle to the other? Or is Shmuel even allowing us to light with an intermediary, something like a match or another piece of wood? The crux of this argument would be, is it a disgrace to light with an intermediary? And we have 2 schools of thought in the Rishonim. The Rambam and the Rif say, mutar ladlik miner lener. However, they don't say whether or not you're allowed with an intermediary. The Ramban, however, says clearly that an intermediary is a sword, and the simple explanation in the Rif and the Rambam is like that miner lener without an intermediary is allowed. However, the Avad, the Rashba, the Sefer Turma, all say that miner l'ner with an intermediary is okay. And since you're lighting from one ner of mitzvah to another ner of mitzvah, it doesn't matter that you have something in the middle, that you're just extending it from one to the other, which is fine. The Rosh brings the Gemara, and he discusses it in the Bet Yosef, does bring the Rosh, and the Rosh is posek, seemingly like the Rif and the Rambam. However, he discusses what changed in Shmuel's Havana, and he gives a few explanations. Again, Sham, it's a very interesting discussion. The Tosafot seems to be posek like the Sefer Turma and the Ran, that it's allowed. However, he says, Kevan shenoagim ha'olam la'achmir and l'shanot ha'minhag. Since there's a custom to be machmir, one should not be lenient. Practical nafkamina for this scenario is when you're using a shamash, and the shamash candle gets extinguished. Can you take from one of the other nerot mitzvah a light? You lit number 1 and number 2, right? Or let's say tonight's number 7, and you lit 7 and 6, and the shamash goes out, and you want to light the next candle, the 5th. Can you use the 6th candle? And that's a simple nafkamina between these two shitot. The Darkei Moshe brings a very interesting concept from Rabbeinu Simcha. Rabbeinu Simcha says it's really allowed, and even with an intermediary, it's allowed. However, one should be machmir. And he says a very interesting reason. He says, Hatam sheikar mitzvah hiner echad ish ubeto. Like we've learned, the essential mitzvah is that a person has to light one candle. The others are nerot hidur. And he says, he calls them even nerot reshut, non-obligatory candles. And therefore, since they're only hidur mitzvah, if a candle goes out, you shouldn't light the other ones, because since it's not a mitzvah anymore, it's not on the same level. He's looking at the nerot of the other nerot. If you lit one, that he's looking them as at a lower level because they're not obligatory. Therefore, he says you shouldn't do it. And also he mentions that since kavta in zakukla, since if a candle goes out, you're not required. So therefore, let's say you lit a candle and it went out, you can't take from a candle that's lit, because once it went out, there's no chiyuv to relight it, and therefore you'd have to light a new fire, a new match, and you cannot use one of the candles that are lit. How is Maran posek? How is the Rama posek? Tav Reshayin Dalet Sif Aleph. Maran says, Madlikin ner Hanukkah mener Hanukkah. V'davka le'adlik mizeh lezeh pelo imtzai. Maran says clearly, like the Rif and the Rambam and the Ramban, and the Rosh and the Tur, not to light with intermediary candle, but one to the other is okay. If you have long wicks, it's easier. If you have candles, it's easier. Our short wicks, it's a little difficult. But that's the deen. Aval le'adlik mizeh lezeh aidei ner shel chol asur. The Maran does say, v'yesh matirin gam bazeh, to use a candle in the middle, an intermediary candle in the middle. Maran says yesh matirim. The Rama, however, says v'nagu lahachmir v'nerot Chanukah shelo lalik afilu miner lener, like the Tosafot said, like Rabbeinu Simcha, like the Darkei Moshe said. The custom is to be machmir. Maran does not bring this Tosafot that is machmir, and I think Maran sees that the majority of Rishonim say that it's allowed, and therefore Maran is not machmir. He explains, like the Rabbeinu Simcha, the comments ato eno ele ner echad, v'ashar eno lemitzvah kol kach, v'lachen en la'adlik zeh lezeh. Bet Yosef brings a very interesting point from the Tumat edition. The Tumat edition is explaining this deen, and he says even according to the Sefer Teruma and the Ran that allow it with a match, with something in between the two candles, it's only allowed if you will likely be successful in reaching the destination. Meaning, if there's a likelihood that the match on the way from candle number 1 to candle number 2 will go out, therefore, you're not allowed to do it. I had a little bit of difficulty understanding this, what's going on over here. And I think that the explanation is that if you think that you can't get from candle number 1 to candle number 2, maybe there's a distance, maybe there's a wind, therefore it's a bizui mitzvah. We have to always remember that the concept here was bizui mitzvah, not giving kavod to the mitzvah. So if you're going to take from one candle, you have to make sure that you're going to get to the next candle. And therefore, if you don't think that you can get there, it's a sur. And Maran brings this in the Shulchan Aruch, and he says אלא אם כן הוא בעניין שיש לחוש שיכבה הנר של כל קודם שהדליק נר אחר של חנוכה. It's only allowed whether according to the Rambam and the Tur, or whether according to the Sefer Turma and the Ran that are allowed with a match in between. It's only allowed if you're sure that you can get to the candle where you want to light. Another point that the Kemosher brings from the Nimukei Yosef is that this deen is only a sort to take from a candle that's ongoing, a candle that's being performed the mitzvah. However, if the candle passed its time, possibly after a half hour, or if its mitzvah was already done, therefore it's allowed. And he gives an example of the Tur Bet Knesset, which we'll discuss soon. He says, let's say we're about to put out the candles in the Bet Knesset, and the Gabbai wants to light his cigarette. Seemingly, from the Nimukei Yosef, it's allowed. And the Ramah brings this deen as well in Sif Aleph, and he says, Kol ze eno rak be'od shedolkin lemitzvatan. Only when they're being used for the mitzvah. Aval har she'avar zman mitzvah mutarim be'hana'ah kol shemutar la'adlik mehen. You have to remember, after a half hour, like we mentioned in the previous shurim, you're allowed to get hana'ah after a half hour. And the same deen would apply here, that you can use these candles after the time. Seif Bet discusses, what about other candles that we have that are considered Nerot Mitzvah? The Bet Yosef and the Tur bring a Sefer Teruma who discusses Nerot Shabbat, Nerot Bet Knesset, the Darkei Moshe adds in Nerot for Talmud Torah, or for a Choleh, or a lady that's giving birth. Very important that she has light. And he discusses that all these are considered Ner Mitzvah, and therefore they're interchangeable. You can light Ner Chanukah from Ner Bet Knesset, Ner Shabbat from Ner Chanukah. The Aharonim say even a Ner Havdalah is also a Ner Mitzvah. And therefore, one to the other is allowed. Now, if we look at the Sefer Teruma, when the Bet Yosef brings it, he's discussing with a match. It's obvious that the Sefer Teruma is discussing the way he understood the Sugya, the way he understood Shmuel. However, the way Maran is posek bistam, like we always learn that Maran is posek stam v'yesh halakha kistam, like the first opinion, when he doesn't say b'shem yeshomrim. Therefore, according to Maran, this deen will only be allowed without an intermediary, but according to the Sefer Teruma, it will be allowed with an intermediary. And that's how we should understand Seif Bet. Seif Bet says, Yesh mi she'omer, she'ner she'bet knesset v'shel Shabbat v'shel Hanukah, kulam she'mitzvahem, umutar la'adlik ze mizeh. Meaning, according to the first opinion, without anything in between, according to the second opinion, with in between. But the idea here is that since they have a common denominator, that they're all Nerot Mitzvah, it's allowed to light one from the other. The Ramah adds in what we mentioned from the Nimukei Yosef, V'wadin ner she'tamud Torah, or ner l'choleh atzarich ner, u'b'inyan ner she'bet Knesset. He sends us to Siman Kuf Nun Daled, which has the laws of Bet Knesset. It's important to know that the Mishnah Berurah does bring that the Gaon of Vilna learns that there is a shita that is machmir in these dinim in Seif Bet, and seemingly that opinion will be Choleg Amaran. Ayin Sham. Thank you for joining us. Hanukkah Sameach.